Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Hard to Be Human. I am your host, Chad Rogers, and in today's episode, we are going to be talking about success, a little bit about what it is, what it's not, how it plays out in your life, those types of things. Now, there's a really good quote from the TV show Married with Children, and it comes from the main character, Al Bundy. And it kind of talks a little bit about how he defines success, at least how he defines it for himself. Now, if you've never seen the show, all that you really need to know is that Al had great hopes for his life when he was younger. He was a high school football player, a star. He thought that he would continue on to higher levels of football and be a star at those levels as well. Now, he didn't make it any further than high school football, and instead, he works at a mall as a shoe salesman. He hates his job. He makes very little money. He drives a beat-up old Dodge that breaks down constantly. He's dissatisfied with his wife, who spends any money that he does make, and she sits at home all the time eating bonbons. His daughter is pretty, but she's not smart, and she's kind of easy. His son is not smart. He's not tall. He's not strong. He's basically a failure with the ladies. So Al got basically nothing that he wanted from life, and his future looks just as dim as his current situation. So few things ever go right for him, but even when they do, when something does go right, it's almost always followed immediately by losing whatever good thing came his way. So in short, he is basically as unsuccessful as he could be, at least in other people's eyes, including the lives of his family, and then also he's very unsuccessful in his own eyes as well. Now, in the scene that the quote comes from, Al is helping a woman to try on shoes, and she is overweight, which is typically who he ends up helping. But she keeps trying to fit her feet into shoes that are too small for her. And that's another regular occurrence for Al, trying to fit women's feet into shoes that are too small. Now, the woman says or insinuates that Al is a loser, and Al goes on a tear. And here's what he says. All right, this is the quote. "So you think I'm a loser just because I have a stinking job that I hate, a family that doesn't respect me, a whole city that curses the day I was born? Well, that may mean loser to you, but let me tell you something. Every morning I wake up, I know that it's not going to get any better until I go back to sleep again. So I get up, I have my watered down Tang and still frozen Pop-Tart, get in my car with no upholstery, no gas, and 6 more payments to fight traffic just for the privilege of putting cheap shoes on the cloven hooves of people like you. I'll never play football like I thought I would. I'll never know the touch of a beautiful woman. And I'll never again know the joy of driving without a bag on my head. But I'm not a loser, because despite it all, me and every other guy who will never be what they wanted to be are out there still being what they don't want to be 40 hours a week for life. And the fact that I haven't put a gun in my mouth, you pudding of a woman, makes me a winner." So there is one kind of form or definition of success, in this case, namely not having put a gun in one's mouth. Perhaps, hopefully, we can find a better, more vaunted or higher aiming idea of success than simply not committing suicide. So, what might be a definition of success? Merriam-Webster defines it as a degree or measure of succeeding, favorable or desired outcome, the attainment of wealth, favor, or eminence. Vocabulary.com defines it as something like an event that accomplishes the intended purposes or an attainment that is successful, a state of prosperity or fame, a person with a record of success. Now, frankly, I look at these definitions and they seem inadequate to me. At least certain pieces of them do. They mention wealth and fame as measurements of success, and Webster even says it's a measure of succeeding, which is pretty lame, because usually you don't use the word that you're trying to define in the definition itself. So I found these definitions to be unhelpful, or at least very, very limited. Now, if success is making a lot of money or being famous, that means that the majority of humans that have ever lived are failures, because the majority of people are not haven't been really, really wealthy or really, really famous. So that makes the majority of people failures. Now, I believe that we can broaden the idea of success, not in an effort to include more people, but simply because money and fame are not the only measurements for success. Now, let me just say, there are any number of wealthy people, wealthy and famous people, who are highly dissatisfied with their lives. And there are a number of wealthy, famous people who use drugs to escape reality. And it would seem that they should be the ones who are not using drugs, because their lives should be so tremendous from the success that they have gained that they wouldn't want or need to use drugs. And I'm not going to go through and list all of the wealthy, famous people who have lived that have died because of drug overdoses, because they are legion. It seems fairly obvious that there has to be more to success than just money and power. But I would like to share also one of my favorite quotes. Now, I have this quote written on a sticky note, and I keep it in my planner, and I've carried it for quite some time now. It's by Rudyard Kipling. Kipling, just to give you context here, wrote The Jungle Book. Disney didn't write The Jungle Book. He also wrote a book called Kim, and one called The Man Who Would Be King. Pretty good novels if you're interested. Now, here's what Kipling says in the quote. He says, "Beware of over-concern for money or position or glory. Someday you will meet a man who cares for none of those things. Then you will know how poor you are." Now, if you've ever met someone who tried to impress you with their money, their cars, their house, their job, achievements, accolades, then this might really ring true for you. Because I've met several of those people, the ones who are wealthy, who really try to impress people with those things. And I really wasn't impressed with them. But then I have also met people who had all of those things, the money, the wealth, the power, the accomplishments, and they didn't try to impress me with those things. And I was very impressed with their humility and their modesty. Now, this brings me to my next point. There are several ways to measure success. It depends on the person as to what success looks like for them. But success can be measured by a range of things like your personal life, your family, your education, hobbies, sports accomplishments, mental health, physical health, your career, how you're perceived by your peers or by the society that you live in. It could also be measured by something like peace of mind. And that one's important for me on this list, because it's something that I have striven for many portions of my life, and it's often been very, very difficult for me to attain. So success might be something like peace of mind. It could also be something like spiritual growth, and it could be something like pleasure as well. And there's a lot more that it could be, but that just kind of gives you an idea of, hey, there's a lot of ways that you could try to measure success. Now, some goals are measurable, and it's helpful to measure and to track them. Things like money and fame are measurable. You can measure how much money you have. You could also measure how much fame you have, because we talk about Hollywood types being A-listers or B-listers or whatever. And so fame can also be something that you can, in fact, track. And so that's true of many, many things that we could use to define success. But there are some things that are successful, some goals that we set for ourselves that are not measurable. And it's important that you know when things are not measurable, so that you can approach them as something that is not trackable, or at least less trackable, or not trackable in the same way as money or fame. You may have to look inside yourself and kind of guess to know where you are as far as being successful. And you kind of have to guess about where you are as compared to where you want to be and what that might look like. And so, again, that's not quite as trackable as some things. So just be sure when you are trying to track these things that are less trackable, or measure the things that are less measurable, just be sure that you're patient, because, for example, becoming the person that you want to become is going to take a lot of time, just like learning any other skill. If you want to learn how to play the piano, it's going to take a lot of time. Becoming the person that you want to become, can take a lot of time as well. So be patient as you're trying to become successful in these different endeavors. Also, remember that comparison is the thief of joy. So worry more about yourself and less about those around you. Someone else's success doesn't mean that you're a failure, and your success doesn't mean that someone else is a failure. It's just really, really important that you take joy in whatever success that you have, and that you're not as worried and you're not comparing yourself to someone else's success, but rather you're taking joy in your own success and you're understanding where you are in your journey, so that you can take joy and then continue on striving for the things that you want. Now, I'm going to come back to those ideas in just a moment, but let's kind of start the rest of this process by looking at the first step. Now, what's the first step to success? It is identifying what you value. It's identifying what you value. And that's why I helped you to think about your primary purposes in the second episode of this podcast. That was so that you could come to understand what it was that you value. Because once you know that, then you can begin to work toward those valuable things and understand their place in your life. You will also begin to understand, for example, that this is that it could be a lifelong journey. So, for example, if physical health, lifelong physical health is something that you value, then maybe winning something like a race or a competition is great, but it's not the goal. If lifelong health is is what you value, then winning some of those things might be helping you to approach your goals, but it's just a step in the journey toward the overall thing that you are wanting. And so kind of thinking of it in that long term. Now, I believe also that there are two kinds of success. First of all, there's external success, and then there's internal success. External success is the stuff that you accomplish or that you acquire. So internal success is becoming the person that you want to be. And to me, internal success is more valuable than external success. Now, remember that Kipling quote that I used earlier, but let me build on that with another quote from a song by the rapper T.I. And in the song is Live Your Life. And in it, one of the verses that he raps, and I'm not going to attempt to do that, and you're very grateful that I'm not, but in it, he raps and he says that other rappers are hooting and hollering about how much money they make or what kind of cars they drive. And what he tells them is that your values is a disarray, prioritizing horribly, unhappy with the riches because you're piss poor morally. Now, I remember the first time I heard these words, I was doing cardio at the gym, and it's not very often that I smile while I'm doing cardio, but I smiled at this. I don't know how, I really didn't expect to find some kind of life wisdom in the music that I was listening to in that moment, but I glanced at the song, got that title in my head because I wanted to come back to it. Now, what did I say the first step towards success is? I said it's finding what you value. And then what did the rapper say? Well, he said, your values is a disarray, prioritizing horribly. Now, I said money and other external accomplishments are less important than internal accomplishments. And I can't say exactly what T.I. had in mind when he said you're piss poor morally, but I feel certain that it's an internal trait that those other rappers are poor in. I take it to mean something like you're piss poor when it comes to character or integrity. They think the external is important and they've neglected the internal. He's telling them that their focus is wrong because it's on things. It's on things when what's truly valuable is not what's on the outside. It's not all of the things that they're acquiring, the cars and the houses, but instead it's on their internal self. So what are those things that we're focused on? So what are the things that we should focus on? Well, success, as it turns out, is really broad. It can be all-encompassing, and it can be, I hate this word, subjective in the sense that it is up to the person. Now, success is, it's slippery. It's difficult to define and to understand. Who has it? How do we measure it? How will it, what will it feel like? How will I know when I've arrived? Can I arrive? Or is it just an ongoing struggle with no end in sight? Now, I was speaking with someone, with a young person. She was around 20. I was talking to her about love, and she was trying to figure out what love should look like, or what love should feel like, and how she would know when she was in love. And I told her that in love, there is no should. There is only what is and what could be. So in love, there is no should. There's only what is and what could be. Love will look and feel very different for different people. Now, what you see on television or read in a poem or hear in a song might not describe what love is like for you. It might not correctly or it might not adequately describe your experience. People have different personalities and different experiences, which means that their understanding of love will be different. So, like love, success can look very different for different people. And it's important to realize there is no should in love and there's no should in success. There is what is, meaning there is where you are right now on your journey of success. That's what is. And there is what could be, meaning the potential that you have to reach a successful life. So there is no should, there just is what is, and there is what could be. So success might include something as simple as where you live. So for example, one of the things that my parents wanted was to live somewhere that they would vacation, and they do. So they're successful in the sense of that they wanted to live somewhere they would vacation. They live on top of a mountain that overlooks a national forest, and so they got success in where they live. Or success might come in the form of something like investing in a hobby, but it could also be as complex or as difficult as something like your character and how you're perceived or how you want to be perceived by your family or your community. So that's complicated because it can mean different things for different people, and not just different people, but as you age, your priorities are going to change, which means that success will look different for you at different stages in your life as well. So success might be something like living a life that's valuable. Okay, what does that mean? It means that you have a vision for your life that's based on or is founded on what you value. And because you're working toward things that you value, it justifies all the sacrifice and the effort put into living for those things. Now, maybe that's too simple. On the other hand, maybe life is that simple. That doesn't mean that it's easy to live the life. It just means that it might not be as complex. Success might not be as complex as it seems initially. Maybe it's as simple as living for what is valuable to you. And the hard, complex part is finding what you value and then building a structure that allows you to shape your life around those things. And then measuring your progress. But remember that for many of us, things that we value the most cannot be quantified. They can't be counted. So maybe the difficulty is that success is often, as I said, subjective. It might be personal, that there is no way to define or measure it. Now, I kind of hate this. I love things that are measurable. I hate things that are subjective, because what I want is to be able to lay out things for my listeners so that they can have knowledge, so they can make a choice. And this isn't one of those things. In some ways, you're really on your own, and all I can do is to promote thought. And by the way, promoting thought is success for me. If I can promote thinking in your life, I have been successful. But that doesn't mean that you need to promote thinking in other people's lives to be successful. It just means that that's something that how I define part of success for myself. Now, success is odd. It's so personal and it is so subjective. But what I want to encourage you to realize is that it's not subjective for you, in the sense that you can define it for yourself and you can become it. You can achieve that life of success, whatever that picture might look like for you. But it is singular and it is personal. Outside forces may influence what you decide success looks like, but ultimately that definition or how it looks really is up to you. So, is it hard to be successful like the title says? Uh, yes, no, maybe. Perhaps for some, success just, kind of comes naturally. For me, it's difficult because I'm trying to get people to think, which is always a struggle for several different reasons. But let me add to this and put it this way. Perhaps the hardest thing about being successful is realizing what success looks like for us. It's hard to stop comparing ourselves to others and measuring ourselves in that way. It's easy to fall into the trap of defining success in terms of money or fame because those things are measurable. But perhaps the real barrier to success is not, understanding. Perhaps the real barrier to success is not underachieving, but instead it's underthinking or it's under realization. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I said the first step to success is knowing what you value. And you can't know that unless you've thought about what is valuable to you. And then I talked a little about what success is not. It's not money, it's not fame. It might include those things, but it's not limited to those things. It seems that for most of us, we know this on some level, but we don't always live by that truth. Now, I talked about um, the importance of trying to measure or gauge our success as well, but also how success is subjective, so that can really only be measured by an individual. It means that you will have to think about your life and how you're doing when it comes to living for what you value. So all of these steps that I'm about to give you again require thinking in order for you to come to the realization of whether or not you are successful. So you have to think about what you value, then you have to think about what success is not, then you have to think about what success is to you. Then you have to think about how to measure your success. Then you have to think about how well you're doing when it comes to success based on the answers that you've given to those questions. And then you have to think about steps for making changes or perhaps just continuing on your way towards that successful life. That's a lot of thinking. So I'll say it again. Perhaps the true barrier to success is not underachievement, but it's underthinking or it's under realization. Maybe we are more successful than we realize because we have been looking at success through the wrong lens. It's like wearing someone else's glasses. If you try to understand success by looking through the lenses of other people's ideas of success, it will distort your vision. Perhaps this is true, and perhaps this is the bigger problem for most people. Now, so, finding success can be hard, but then what would you expect? After all, it is hard to be human. If you found this to be valuable, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.